So, just to give you a bit of a background on myself, my name is Bhairav Patel. I'm the founder of Atom CTO and Atom Ventures. And what we do is we provide virtual CTO services to businesses. So essentially what we do here is if you are a company that doesn't necessarily have a tech team or doesn't have, or has a tech team that needs some help, we can come in as experienced CTOs and help you develop a product roadmap and execute and develop on that roadmap with using the network of suppliers and vendors that we have. So there was a question just earlier on, which I want to touch on just very briefly before I get into my talk, which is around building a website during this period. Now, obviously, it's a little bit about how long is a piece of string. So if you are interested in building a website, what we can do is help you at the moment frame what exactly it is you need, what you're trying to do. And both myself and Mike are able to help within that. There are definitely companies within the network that is here that can help you for that. And you'll see my contact details at the bottom. Mike will share his later on. And if you feel free to share your details with us, we can get in touch with you and help you through that process. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is managing remote teams. And so Atom CTO, Atom Ventures are both companies that started remotely. And I've been managing remote teams for the last 15 years. And I've been working with development teams across the globe. One example is that we had teams running in New Zealand, the US, Norway, and in the UK. So we had a 24/7 development life cycle. And as you can imagine, that has its own challenges when you're trying to remote manage teams from all over the country with different cultures. Across the globe with different cultures. So what I'd like to do here is just kind of talk to you a little bit about the best practice that we've implemented over these years and how we've found working with teams remotely and how you can just make sure that you work securely and effectively and also optimize those processes that you'll put in place as you go along. So let me first talk about communication. So communication is something I can't really stress enough. When you're working remotely, what you really need is clear and open channels of communication. So many of you will be using things like Teams or Slack. One of the first things you need to do is to ensure that each of your business units or each of your different areas within the company have their own channels to communicate with each other, and that there's someone within your business, a senior manager, or if you as a business owner are there monitoring that. It's not necessarily to keep tabs on people, but it's just to make sure that there's no bottlenecks within the teams that are working for you, so that they can understand if there's questions, then they know that someone can get to those questions quickly. If there's any issues, you can help solve them. And it's also about keeping up people's morale, so they have a little forum in which they can chat to different chat to their teammates. We always have a daily stand-up call. So it's a 5-minute call, and it doesn't all necessarily mean it's work. It can be 50% work, 50% chat. And a lot of what people do is it's a good way of people sharing any issues that they may have, but it's also a way for you to set goals of what people need to get done. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you're going to be not only just setting goals, but also in reducing the bottlenecks because people aren't necessarily working at the times that you normally expect them to be working. One important thing here is do not over communicate. So one of the things that you can do quite quickly is you can start trying to contact people on Teams, on email, on the phone, and really what you should be doing is having one clear channel of communication and then one other channel where you know that is more or less kind of an emergency set of communication. So for example, I work very heavily with Teams, and I know that if I need something urgently from one of my team, I will call them directly. So that they know if there's a phone call, then they should be picking that up. I know that if I put something out on Teams, it'll be picked up at the time in which those other people are working, and I know that they'll see it. But if I need something immediate, I will get that through a phone call. And what you don't want to do is overload people, especially if you've got clients that are trying to contact you through WhatsApp and email and text message. The best thing to do is try and reduce those sets of communications down so you know where you're communicating, what you're communicating, and how the urgency of those communications. The next thing is trust. So trust and setting goal setting. Now, what you find is, a number of inexperienced managers, when people work from home, they feel they kind of lose control. So you kind of get, poor managers tend to get found out fairly quickly in this situation, simply because one of two things happens. Either they overcompensate and micromanage, or you see them pulling back and they kind of disappear. So what you really want to do is make sure your team feels that they're trusted. I think the key thing here is that people aren't necessarily going to be working the set 9 to 5 hours. It's going to be very difficult for your kids. You've got people that you need to look after within the house for you to be able to work those set 9 to 5 hours. So having that daily team meeting, that 5-minute call with people to ensure that these are the goals and these are the things that need to be done today, this week, this month, and also ensuring that people understand when other people are working. So for example, if you know that you've got things to be done in the morning because you look after the kids, then it's important that anyone who's dependent on you knows that you can then say, okay, we're going to set this time to talk so that we can walk through any issues that you've got. So, be aware that people aren't necessarily going to be sitting there at 9 to 5 in front of their PCs. The next thing is making sure you have company-wide meetings. So again, when you're working remotely, it can be easy to feel lonely and isolated. And what is useful, and what I found, is that every week, or maybe even 2 weeks, depending on the size of your business, what we tend to do is have a company-wide meeting where we talk about the business itself, how it's going, what new leads we may have, what new business we may have, current projects, any kind of issues that you've got that are on top of the daily stand-up. So this is more where the senior management can come in and really talk to the business and talk to the teams and help them feel that not only are they part of a wider business, but the business hasn't gone away, it hasn't necessarily disappeared, and that they feel a sense of security that actually the job is still there and that they are working towards something bigger. And the last thing is really having fun. So obviously people miss the office banter, people miss the kind of the conversations that you have within an office, and you can have that within the team, within the team's framework. You can easily set up quick chats, side chats with people, but also try and do something fun. Try and do something fun every week. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on out there on the net at the moment, so it's very important that you maintain that fun aspect. What I'm going to talk about now is about the kind of more practical aspects. So obviously Rajan talked about this when he talked a little bit about insurance, but of course, once you've got devices, a lot of you may have bought devices for your teams and be giving them laptops, etc. What you need to do is make sure that they're secured. So you need to make sure that your IT department, or whoever it is that manages your IT devices, has secured those laptops. It may well be things like locking down USB ports, ensuring that there's up-to-date antivirus on the laptops, making sure passwords are secure. So we use tools like 1Password or LastPass to share passwords in amongst teams, so you're not actually sharing plain passwords via plain text. Because again, that is something that tends to happen when people are working from home. They tend to be a little bit more lax around security. Things like auditing. Now, I'm not saying that you should audit what your people are doing and when they're doing it, but it's more along the lines of, when are people accessing your systems? Do you know when people are actually accessing and downloading information from you? Because again, because devices are connected to your network from home, there is more opportunity for other people to actually access them. I'm not saying anything malicious will happen, but people do tend to be a little bit more relaxed at home, which goes to my next point around governance. So governance is very important when you're looking at simple things like financial movements, moving money. Where you have processes which may work in the office, you'll need to make sure that those processes are even tighter when you're outside of the office. And as Rajan said, cybersecurity is essential. So there are a lot more phishing attacks going on, and you can see that in the news, that there's a huge increase in cybercrime, where people are targeting individuals at their homes because they are a little bit less kind of, not necessarily aware, but they may be a little bit more relaxed in the way that they're doing things. And so you need to make sure that the governance that you have along your procedures are tight, and that you're enforcing those, and that there is an audit trail that can show that you are actually enforcing those. Now, a couple of key things here that people may not understand: you may have shifted to Office 365 or G Suite over this period. One of the very important things to note to you guys is that Office 365 is not backed up. And what I mean by that is that there is resilience, obviously, in Microsoft, that if one of their nodes fails, they'll have data copied to another place. But if there is a catastrophic event, then your data is not backed up. So that means your SharePoint data, your OneDrive data, your emails, that is not backed up by anyone. So if it's lost, it's lost. And there are a number of different tools out there that can help journal your emails, back up your files to the cloud. And please feel free to get in contact with us. We're trialing a number of different software that will help businesses of different sizes ensure that their data is backed up. So if there is a catastrophic event that happens, that you can restore that data. And again, with data loss prevention, what is important that, again, if you're with Office 365, there are a lot of tools built within Office 365 to help you prevent data loss. And what I mean by that is, for example, people emailing spreadsheets of employees that may need to be furloughed, et cetera, right? So that there are tools within Microsoft that allow you to do this from day one. There are some small costs in there, but really it kind of moves to the next phase of what I'm trying to talk about, which is optimizing and reviewing your procedures and processes. Because obviously now you're working remotely, a lot of the processes that you'll have had in-house will be different, and they may not actually extend out to working remotely. And you may need to realize that you may want to have additional levels of security, data classification, data loss prevention rules, all of these policies and procedures in place that you may not have had before. So it's something that you need to start looking at and understanding, okay, this is going to be a new normal. Working remotely is not going to go away now. People have had the taste of it. It'll be something that I'm sure people have asked you within your own business that this is what they want to do more of. And so now you need to look at your processes and procedures and decide on how you can optimize those. And again, when we're talking about that, you want to remove any tasks that are non-value adding, so things that don't add to your top line or reduce your bottom line, and look at things like automating low risk, high frequency tasks, and actually spending this time now to have a look at your overall procedures and processes and say, okay, are there areas within my current procedures and processes that I can actually reduce time, save costs by automating, bringing in things like CRM systems or accounting systems or whatever it is that you can then use to reduce the amount of time spent doing manual tasks. So I've kind of whizzed through a lot there in a very short period of time. What I'll do now is I will do as Lena did and end my screen sharing to see if what questions are out there for us. I'll bring you back into the fold there, Mike.
Seen any specific questions for you there, Bhairav, but I've got one myself that I think may be relevant to a number of people. There's so many options out there in terms of communications channels and technology tools. How do you decide what's right for you or what's right for your team?
So I think, when we started, we experimented with everything. So we're kind of the early adopters, and we tried Slack when it first came out, Teams when it first came out, Yammer, pretty much every single tool you can imagine that was there, even working things in SharePoint. And I think the thing that we've settled on is that in all, they're kind of much of a muchness. Slack is great when you come in channels, but Teams has the same thing. What you've got to figure out is how are your people working? So if it's a lot of people working mobile, like on their phones, what has the best mobile app that has the one that is best user interface for you? How is your team structured? So do you need specific things like channels? So for example, Slack is great for channels. And what kind of integrations do you need? So are you looking to create something that has a lot of productivity within one space? So again, Slack is great for that because you've got integrations into things like HubSpot, you've got integrations into Outlook, et cetera, et cetera. However, when we've done that and we've tried to put everything into one place, what you find is the noise is overwhelming. And you get a lot of noise because you'll get emails coming in, you've got notifications, and everything just starts firing up. So you've got to, I think, for us, what we decided was that we wanted to strip down communication into exactly what it was, which is sharing documents and sharing information. And so Teams was great for that because it just allowed us to share documents in there and just to chat plainly. But if you feel that you need something more robust and complex, something like Slack will work quite well for you. I think the key things there really are to understand how do your people work, how tech savvy are they, and really what is the purpose of that kind of communication? Are you doing it as to run your business out of it, or are you doing it just to have a conversation? And I think then you evaluate based on that.
Absolutely. Someone's made a really valid point there that working with local authorities and government limits your choice. There's certain things that they either can't access because of their security protocols, or in some cases, and I've come across this, they're still running Windows 95 or something.
Yeah, no, that's true.
So a couple of questions about security, actually. You mentioned already about Office 365 and some other systems not automatically backing up. Can you recommend any specific affordable options for creating those sorts of backups?
So what we're doing is we're evaluating a couple at the moment. One is called Data Vault, which actually Mark, very well from that. And there's another product that we're looking at the moment whose name completely slips my mind. We've also used in previous projects journaling. So Symantec has a journaling aspect on email. Again, a little bit depends on what you need. So something like Data Vault can actually back up your entire Azure and your AWS platforms. So anything that you've got out there, virtual machines, can be backed up there, as well as emails, etc. So what I would suggest is have a quick, if you get in touch with me on, either on LinkedIn at Bhairav Patel or Bhairav at atomcto.com, what we can do is have a quick discussion of your needs, and we can take a look at what we've been looking at, what we've used previously, and find out what your needs are, because as you can imagine, costs do kind of escalate quite quickly if you've got lots and lots of data.
A really interesting and valid question about whether you would choose Zoom over Skype or vice versa. And if I can couple that up with someone else has asked, what's the best way to sort of cascade management? So if you've got middle managers, you do perhaps a one-to-one with each of them, but that can eat a lot of time, especially if you're doing it as regularly as a daily stand-up. So yeah, one-to-ones, sort of video tools, and how would you structure that conversation to make sure it's efficient?
All right, because I realize I'm eating into your time here, but I'll try and be quick. Skype or Zoom, again, Skype has just been a bit of a nightmare over the last X number of years. And to be honest, Microsoft are moving away from Skype and putting more actual money and development behind Teams. Teams is actually not a bad thing to use if you want your one-to-ones. Zoom is great, but again, you have to download the software, and depending on your PCs, how much level of access that you've got for your employees, whether you've locked them out of admin roles and things like that, Zoom and GoToMeeting can be a little bit tricky. I know for certain accountancy firms, for example, when we've tried to have meetings with them, they've not been able to use GoToMeeting simply because you have to download and run something on the laptops. We actually use another thing called Uber Conference, which is purely web-based. And I think it can have a number of, there's a free version and a £10 or $10 a month version. It's purely web-based. You can open up in Chrome, you can share your screens, and we've had good success with that because it's a simple, cheap option to share. To obviously not only to share screens, but to have video web conferencing. So I would in many ways, I would avoid Skype. If you're going to look at Skype, look at Teams. Yes, it was called Uber. I saw the thing, Uber Conference. Sounds like it comes from Uber, but I don't think it does. So it's called Uber Conference. It's another one and has a funky hold music as well for you. On the senior members of the team, what I've done previously is you have obviously each team, whatever teams they are, they'll have their senior manager involved in that daily stand-up. And I would not have a daily stand-up with my senior members. No, I would have that more on a weekly basis, because you'd be setting targets and goals for those on a weekly or monthly basis, right? But you just have that communication channel. So what we would do, or what I'd normally do, is I'd have the team leads would know that they can contact me through Slack or whatever it is if they needed something. But I wouldn't do a one-on-one with them every day. It would be more of a weekly, and that would be overarching goal setting of these are the things that we need to get done. So I guess what I'll do is I'll hand over to you, and I'll come back in.
There's a couple more questions there. Just one in particular about House Party and whether that was a hoax about that being hacked. Not sure if you got any information on that. I certainly haven't. I did delete my account because I heard some first-hand reports of problems and hacks into other accounts. Other question that I thought was really interesting and relevant: how do you secure projects for outsourced teams? And I think, Bhairav, you sort of touched on that, about having those systems and processes in place to share things like passwords, things like access to information, access to tools, but to sort of have a consistent way of managing that sort of thing. But again, if perhaps that's something that was already in place and you now feel a bit more nervous about it, being that it's more of a remote relationship, then again, it's about getting those in place now, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And again, I'll be quick, because again, I'm eating into your time.
That's all right.
But I think the key thing here is that when I work with teams remotely, I have LastPass for Teams, so that all of the passwords are stored in there, and you can segregate the passwords. So if you've got multiple clients, then you know that you can actually, only certain members of the team can see certain passwords and update them. So that's one thing to look at. So something like 1Password, LastPass, those are for securing passwords at least. If you've got outsourced teams that are working on code or building code for you, I would suggest that you need to make sure that if they're using Git or Bitbucket or whatever it is, you have your access to that you have your admin access to that as just standard, so that you know that you've got access to the code at any one point in time. Obviously, there's issues around code being on devices after you finish a project. That's where you need to make sure and go and have ensure that the developers have wiped that, and there's proof that you can that is wiped. Ultimately, there's also ways of keeping code in escrow. But again, if you just contact with me on Bhairav@atomcto.com, we can discuss this a little bit further.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bhairav.